all of us might have in our life at some time have come across a question, when or come across a circumstance or situation, and it feels like God is unfair. We go through some struggle, we go through some pain, or we're experiencing unexpected situation in our life, where we find ourselves in a place, and either we're praying about it, or we're trying to get help from other people. We're trying to get help from friends or any individual or colleagues around us, but we find ourselves in this place where we sit and think, man, God seems so unfair in this situation. And why does it feel like that he's probably not listening to my prayer? Why does it feel like that he's not hearing what I'm saying? Why does it feel like that I'm alone in this situation? That I know things about God, and I do pray to God, and I do read Bibles, I do trying to take counsel from other individuals, but why do I feel like God is unfair? And I think in my opinion, it's I think every individual once in their life go through the season where we feel like God is unfair. And when we look at the present circumstances around our present situation around it, and when we look at it, we see this hopelessness, we see these uncertainties around us, and we always come across this question is when this is going to get over. When first question is why this is happening, what's the reason this is happening, or when it's going to get over, when it's going to end, and how it's going to look like when everything ends, or do we ever going to get across this river? Does it ever going to end? There's so many questions we're going through. And we come across the similar story in Scripture, in God's Word, and today we're going to talk about an individual who found himself in a similar circumstance. He found himself in a similar situation, and he had the same question. He raised the same question. In his dialogue with God, he brought the same issue that God, you seem so unfair. Like I'm asking you to do something, but seems like you're not doing anything. I'm praying, but seems like you're not hearing. And it's like I'm crying unto you, and I'm raising my voice, I'm screaming on top of my lungs, and I'm giving everything that I have to you. I'm emotionally exhausted, and I don't know what to do, where I am. But then God, you just seem so unfair. Why you were just not hearing? And this individual had the same question. And we're gonna look at the dialogue that he had God, and how God responds back to him, the things that God said to him, the revelations that he received from God. And I feel like the revelation that this individual received from God is the same revelation we need in our life today. The same things that we need to look at, the same things we need to draw our inspiration from, our encouragement from, our assurance from. The same revelations that encouraged this individual thousands of years ago is the same encouragement that applies to us today. And I'm hopeful of this, that this will speak to us today and will bring the level of comfort, the level of assurance, level of faith and hope in us, that we know that even though God seems unfair, that's not the end of the road, and that's not true. So we're going to look at from the Old Testament. There's a prophet named Habakkuk. If you look at the Old Testament, there's so many prophets, and prophets has been categorized as major prophets and minor prophet. Major prophets like Isaiah, Daniel, Jeremiah, minor prophets like Micah, Obadiah, and Habakkuk is one of them. This Habakkuk is like a very small book found in the Old Testament. It's not even like 3% of Old Testament. It's a very small book, 3 chapters, but the things are very rich that we found in this book. Habakkuk, who recognizes himself as a prophet, there's not very many things known about this prophet, except that he himself introduces that I am a prophet. That's how he starts the book of Habakkuk, that I am the prophet, and this is what God told me. Habakkuk found himself in a similar circumstances where he saw injustice around him, where he saw corruption around him, where he saw faithlessness around him, where he saw the things around him that he never expected could even happen in amongst people of God. He was taken back. It was surprising for him. He was taken back, and in midst of that, he in all this mess, and his question was, when these things are gonna stop? Is it ever gonna stop? And that was a time when he started having a dialogue with God. He started talking back and forth with God. He started interacting with God in his brokenness, in his confusion, in his anxiousness, in his stress, probably in his insecurities, in his hopelessness. He started to interact with God. And this is what he says in Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 2. He says, "How long shall I cry for help, and you will not listen?" We can sense this desperation in Habakkuk's language. It's like, are you seriously not listening to me? I'm crying for help. I'm trying to talk to you. I'm trying to call upon you. And how long shall I cry for help and you will not listen? Or cry to you violence and you will not save? Why do you make me see wrongdoing and look at trouble? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise. So the law becomes slack and justice never prevails. The wicked surround the righteous, therefore judgment comes forth perverted. He's talking about the circumstances where there's no justice, there is no security, there is corruption, there is violence, there is no peace. This chaotic situation. And Habakkuk is saying, God, I have been crying for help. Will you ever gonna listen to me? Will you ever gonna respond back to me? Will you ever gonna say, I am listening to you? Where are you? This is what it looks like when you start to feel that God is unfair, when we feel like our prayers are not being answered, when we feel like we are in this place where we couldn't do anything. We feel powerless. We feel find ourselves in anxiety, in so much of anxiousness about your future, about our tomorrow. And we find ourselves in a place we feel like we don't have any strength and power to do anything. And whatever we try to do, it's not working. Nothing is changing. It's a similar circumstances Habakkuk has. He cannot do anything about the circumstances that he's facing in his place where he is. He couldn't do much about it. And he turns back to call upon a God who he knows is all-powerful, he's omnipotent, he hears everything, he sees everything, he knows everything, but he's taken back with the fact that he's not listening. And finally, God responds back to him. And this is what God says. Look at the nations and see. Be astonished, be astounded. For a work is being done in your days that you would not believe if you were told. I am rousing the Chaldeans, that fierce and impetuous nation, who march through the breadth of the earth, to seize dwellings not their own. Dread and fearsome are they. Their justice and dignity proceed from themselves. Their horses are swifter than leopards, more menacing than wolves at dusk. Their horses charge. And this is not the answer that Habakkuk was expecting to hear. If I have to replay it and I have to recreate it, probably Habakkuk's response will be like, what? Really? Like, I'm asking for help. I'm asking you to do justice. I'm asking you to get rid of corruption. I'm asking you to do the judgment, to the righteous judgment, because I know you're a righteous God. And you tell me you're going to send Babylonians to bring a judgment over people of Israel for their unrighteousness. Are you seriously kidding me? Like you don't know who Babylonians are? They are more corrupt than people of Israel, people of God. They're more sinful. Their actions are more sinful than your own people. And more than that, they don't even know you. So you are telling me you're going to use people more corrupt than people of Israel to bring justice on the people of Israel. That was not the answer Habakkuk was expecting. This is what he was not wanting to hear. This is not he was looking for. He was looking for solution. He was not looking for God stretching his problems. Because if you look back into the history, the Babylonian invasion or invasion by any kingdom is never a peaceful situation. It's not something that anybody will ever enjoy. They don't come with gifts and tidings and offerings. It's not peaceful, but it always involves a lot of violence. It always involves destruction. It's always involves slavery. It always involves people taking into other kingdom as a slave. It doesn't include empowerment or freedom. It doesn't include everyone getting their right. It doesn't give people opportunity to raise their voice. It doesn't give people a place where they can fight for their rights. It's not. It's an invasion. It's basically one kingdom is coming and taking them as a slave. They will not even have their country anymore. Maybe they will not even exist anymore. And that's not the answer Habakkuk is looking for. He wants solution, but the answer that he gets from God is, I'm going to extend a little bit more. And Habakkuk says this in chapter 2, verse 1. He says, I will stand at my watchpost and station myself on the rampart. I will keep watch to see what he will say to me and what he will answer concerning my complaint. Habakkuk's response is, this is not right. This is not good. This is what I didn't ask for this. When I was crying out to you, when I was desperate to hear your voice, I was expecting that you will do something about it. This is not the answer I was expecting. And this is my complaint to you. I don't want this. I don't want to be judged by Babylonians. They are not righteous. They don't know you. They are worse than the people here. And I don't want to be judged by them. I don't want to be ruled by them. I don't want to come and do justice for me. I want you to do justice for me. And this is my complaint. And now I'm going to see what you will answer. I'm going to stand here at my watchpost and station myself on the rampart, and I will keep watch to see what you will say to me. I don't want this. So many times we find ourselves in this similar situation, right? When God seems unfair, He's not answering our prayers, and when He finally answers, it's like, no. I don't want this. This is not I want. This is not I want in my life. This seems worse than what it was before. It was good that you were not, it was good, we feel like it was good that you were not saying anything. It was better when you didn't say anything. Now you have said it, now it makes things worse. And then God responds back to Habakkuk with these words. Chapter 2, verse 2. Then the Lord answered me and said, write this vision, make it plain on tablets so that a runner may read it. Now, the verse 2 gives us this picture that whatever God is about to reveal to Habakkuk is very crucial for God, right? Even before God can even say it, He's trying to get all of Habakkuk's attention to what He's going to say, right? In past verses, when we read, Habakkuk said something, he cried unto God, and God gave an answer. It was a direct answer. This time, when he's putting forth his question, or he can say putting forth his complaint, or his argument, and his opinion to God, even before giving an answer, God is trying to get Habakkuk's attention, saying, write this vision. No, you listen to me. You make sure what I'm telling to you, you write it. Right? And then he doesn't stop there just by saying, write this vision, right? If we have read the books of other prophets, we always say that this thing of whenever Jeremiah or Isaiah talked about God's word, or God told them to write something, it was like, write something, and they start writing it. Or God says, record it, or say it to your people, they start saying it. But here it doesn't stop just by saying, write this vision. God goes extra step, to say, make it plain on tablet so that the runner may read it. Now I invite you right now just to picturize this with me. This is what God is saying, that write this vision. Okay, this is very important for you to know. Write it, but write it in a way that even if a runner passes by it, running, if he looks at it, he can read it. That's the picture here. And we all know that if you write it in the smallest letter that we can ever write, anyone running by it will never see it. So many times we might have an experience that when we're going through a road trip, or we're driving by a big sign, right? And we pass through it, we see it. Sometimes we miss it because we're driving by fast. Sometimes we're not able to read the whole thing in it. Maybe sometimes we read the parts of it, right? But here God is saying, here is a picture of saying, make sure that even if someone passed by it very quickly, running, They just look at it and they know what it is. So it has to be that big, which tells that it is important. You might have experienced if there is a big politician or someone with big name is coming to your city, coming to your town, they put big banners about it, big billboards about it, like big posters about that person, So everybody knows that that person is coming because that is a highlight of that town, or there is some event going on, there's a farmer's market happening, or anything, there's a fair happening, anything that is happening. If some big event is happening in a city or in town, they put a big posters about it so everybody can know about it. So whenever there is a big poster about something, we know it is important. Or someone is trying to get somebody's attention, right? Or we saw the big billboards of ads because they're wanting to get your attention towards that product. It's a way of getting people's attraction and also to say it's important. And same thing that God is saying with Habakkuk. He's saying, write this vision, and just don't write it on your notebook and shove it on the table. Don't just write it in your journal and just read about it. But you know it, you write it, but you have to make sure everybody else knows about it because this is so important. And God moves on to say this, for there is still a vision for the appointed time. It speaks of the end and does not lie. If it seems to tarry, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Let's see Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 3, right? He moves ahead of writing the vision, make it plain on a tablet, and moves ahead to say, for there is still a vision for appointed time. It speaks of the end and it does not lie. If it seems to tarry, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. God is putting so much effort behind it. He's just not so quick in giving this revelation. I know if I was in place of Habakkuk, I'll probably getting, what are you going to tell me? Just say it. It's just, but God is making sure that Habakkuk understands the importance of what he's going to say. And he says, when I give you this vision, you write it, just so know, it might get delayed. It might feel like it's slow. It might feel like, is it ever going to happen? It's like, I'm just fighting for an answer. You give me answer and I don't like it. Now you wanted to tell me something. You're not telling me, but you keep telling me what important it is. And now you're telling me it might get delayed, but keep your faith, keep your hope that it's not going to lie because God never lies. It's going to happen. It might feel like it's getting slow, but just wait for it. It's going to happen. And then God moves on to say, but the righteous shall live by their faith. Now this is very crucial answer that God gave to Habakkuk. When God seems so unfair to him, when God seems like not hearing his prayers. And God comes back to say, this is very important, write it, and this is what I tell you, the righteous shall live by faith. And when Habakkuk heard this, his whole response changed. The way he talked changed, the way he prayed changed, the way he had a dialogue with God changed. Right? And if we move to chapter 3, which is the last chapter of the book of Habakkuk, it's the prayer of Habakkuk, and that prayer is full of praise. It's proclaiming who God's character is. And this is how he concludes the end 3 verses of the book of Habakkuk. This is what he says. He says, though the fig tree does not blossom, and no fruit is on the vines, though the produce of the olive fails, and the fields yield no food, though the flock is cut off from the fold, and there is no herd in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will exult in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer and makes me tread upon the heights. The whole perspective of Habakkuk changed. His perspective about situation changed. His perspective about God changed. Even his perspective about himself changed. Because what God did with Habakkuk here is he took his attention away from things happening around him to himself. He said, Habakkuk, just so you know, Habakkuk, the only thing that you need to know, and it is very important for you to know, that you as a righteous person shall only live by faith. And sometimes when we find ourselves in a situation that is not very pleasant for us, what brings a breakthrough that when we draw our attention, when we move our attention from our present circumstances and start looking at God. right? Paul, in his writings, when he wrote letter to Romans, he uses the same scripture to communicate the same very thing that God talked to Habakkuk. The believers in the Rome were going through the similar circumstances where they found themselves in hopelessness, where they found themselves persecuted, where they found themselves being stretched. And Paul says, righteous shall live by faith. The meaning of the name of Habakkuk is embrace. Meaning, or the other way of, or to say the meaning of the name Habakkuk is to hug. Right? Sometimes we try to withdraw ourselves from our present circumstances. But what God is telling us today, to embrace what is around you. Doesn't mean how difficult it seems. All you need is to go through this situation is faith. What is faith? Faith is not set of expectations. Faith is not set of lists that you want to happen. Faith is knowing who God is, because our faith comes from the character and nature of God. Our faith comes from who God is, but not from what God can do for us. Because if God doesn't answer our one prayer, it doesn't mean God has changed. If our one prayer doesn't got answered, if there is one situation was not changed in our life, it doesn't mean God's character has changed. Our circumstances doesn't define who God is. Our experiences doesn't define who God is. Our experiences may explain the part of goodness of God. Your experiences might be used by God to bring you to God, but that doesn't define the completeness of God. That doesn't give you the 100% explanation of who God is. Because God is way bigger than our experiences. And sometimes when we are so focused on what is happening around us, what we do is we try to put God in a box. We try to squeeze His identity, and we try to bring Him being smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And what we do is we start to put our circumstances above God. And that's the place where we start to find ourselves hopeless. That's the place we find to start ourselves stuck. That's the place we start to find ourselves in anxiousness, in lack of dreams, lack of vision, lack of desire to do anything, lack of motivation, because all the uneven circumstances around us seems way bigger. That the walls around us seem so bigger, it feels like we're never gonna cross it. We'll never be able to jump around that fence because it's just too high. And we lose the sight of God, because what we have done is our fences has gone bigger and we have brought the God down. And when we look from the other side, we look at the fence, we don't look at the God. But when we try to turn our focus to God, when we try to start meditating on the character and nature of God, when we start to meditate on the promises of God, the words that God has spoken in our lives, the things that God has told us to do in our lives, the dreams that God has given us, the visions that God has given us, the words that God has given us in our life through different people, different individuals, through prayer or intercession, and when we start to meditate on those things, we started to see God peek from that fence that we thought we were stuck. And we started to see this bigger God. And now we know that He can put His hand and He can pull us out. That He can bring us out of that situation. Sometimes it might take a time, right? Same thing God told to Habakkuk. There might be a delay, but it doesn't mean it's a lie. There might be a delay, but it doesn't mean that's not what God is. There might be a wait, but it doesn't mean God doesn't want to do it. One thing that we are sure about God, that He is an unchanging God. One thing that establishes our faith is God is an unchanging God, that He never changes. Who He was thousands of years ago, He is today. And who He is today, He's going to be same God in thousands of years from now. He's never going to change. And that is our assurance. Whatever happens around us, there's a call in our life from God is to embrace it. When we start to embrace the circumstances around us, when we start to be joyful into the things around us, we started to grow in faith. We started to grow in hope. We started to grow in the dreams. we find ourselves encouraged. We find ourselves motivated. And the same thing Habakkuk says. Habakkuk says, though the fig tree does not blossom and no fruit is on the vines, though the produce of the olive fails and the fields yield no food, though the flock is cut off from the fold and there is no herd in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. If you look at the history, and if you try to understand the culture of Habakkuk, if you try to understand the economic structure of the time of Habakkuk, and the things that Habakkuk is telling about himself in this word makes me look like he was a farmer. Maybe he was a shepherd, or maybe he was both. He had a farming land, he had the fruit trees, he had a flock, and that's all he had. That's how the people used to get their day-to-day living. And for Habakkuk to say that my tree doesn't have fruit, to say that my crops don't survive, to say that none of my flocks survive, to say that all his security is gone, all his prosperity is gone, all his growth is gone. He has nothing. The same guy who found himself in hopelessness when he first started to have a dialogue with God, when he was so anxious looking at the present circumstances around us, now he's saying, no matter what happens, I will rejoice in the Lord, because he has learned to embrace things happening around him, knowing that he is secure in God's promises, knowing that what God told me, it's gonna happen. It might seem like there is a delay. It might seem like nothing is happening right now. It might seem like God is not listening to me, but it's not true. If we don't see God working, it doesn't mean he's not working. If we don't see God doing anything in front of us, it doesn't mean he's not doing anything. We might feel like we have been left by God, but it doesn't mean we have. It might feel like he doesn't care about us, but it doesn't mean it's true. And same thing Habakkuk understood, that he started to find himself secure in God's promises. He started to establish himself in the promise that God gave to him, knowing that if he has said it, he's going to do it, no matter what happens. That he will bring to completion, right? Same way God's word says, the one who has started a good work in you will bring it to completion. Because our God is a God who never leaves things halfway. He's a God who doesn't leave the project unfinished. He's a God who is an integrous God. His yes is yes, his no is no. So whatever you're experiencing in your life today, if you find yourself in circumstances where you think God is unfair, when you feel like God is not listening to you, when you feel like, same as like Habakkuk, if you feel like you're crying on for help, but God is not answering, my encouragement to you today is to start meditating on the promises of God. Try to get intentional about it, and try to turn your focus from your circumstances to God. And that's where you're gonna find your breakthrough. That's where you're going to hear God's voice. That's where you want to hear God speak to you, because you have learned to embrace circumstances around you, to say, this might be impossible for me, for God it's not. I might have to be patient for a while. I might have to persevere. I might have to wait, but it doesn't mean it's not going to happen, because God's going to do it. Today, my encouragement for you is start meditating on the promises of God, because if he has said it, he's going to do it.